Hi guys, so the other night I watched 1975's Race with the Devil, not for the first time, I admit. If you don't know what this film is, it's like a cross between Texas Chainsaw Massacre and a film called Judgment Night from the early 90s. Now, if you're not a fan of Texas Chainsaw, don't immediately go scurrying for The Exit. When I compare it to that film, I mean in terms of the journey across Texas into an unknown peril part of that film. We don't have any chainsaws in this. There are no inbred families, no dilapidated farmhouses, anything like that. So the story of this film is that we have two couples who are around about the age of 40, I'd say, and they are about to embark on a driving holiday. Their plan is to go across Texas and then eventually into Colorado, do a bit of skiing, and then turn around and go all the way home again. But they never make it out of Texas. We're just teased with the Colorado thing. We never actually get there. First night on the road, they pull off the freeway into like a field near a stream, and they're just settling down for the night, getting merry, having a couple of drinks, and then about 100 yards away, 200 yards away maybe, a bonfire suddenly lights up. It's really out of the blue when this happens. I didn't expect it at all, and it turns out that there's a cult at this bonfire, and they start dancing around this thing, and eventually they sacrifice a young blonde woman by stabbing her, and our mobile homers who are watching all this from not far away through a pair of binoculars are very much sort of, let's get out of here, like now. They jump back in their vehicle and they try and get the hell out of Dodge, but the cultists spot them fleeing. You know, they hear the engine spark up and they get a good look at the mobile home. So our protagonists, they do try and go to the cops, but the trouble is, the cops that they go to, they're your typical sort of southern state, small town, Sheriff Pepper-esque, useless twats who've just been in the sun too long. They don't want to do any work on this. They're just completely unhelpful. They're sort of like, well, that's a mighty tall tale there, partner. What do you think, deputy? Oh, it's a real zinger, Sheriff. You sure you boys haven't been on the old beer-a-roonies? I'm exaggerating a little bit for effect, but essentially it's like that. I mean, they make a token effort in terms of investigating the claims, but really they don't want to do any work. They don't want to help, and there's sort of a hint that the cops might be working on behalf of the cultists, but you know what, I'm going to come back to that. I've got more to say about that, but for the time being, our protagonists have got no choice basically but to just get back on the road, get back on with their holiday and try and forget what they saw. But the cultists are on their tail. They got a good look at the vehicle, and they got a good look at the people within it. So what we have here is a sort of chase film across Texas, hence the title, Race with the Devil. The reason why I compared it to Judgment Night as well as Texas Chainsaw is because, okay, so to divert just briefly into Judgment Night, that is a film about a group of guys who want to go to a boxing match in LA, but to get there, they travel in basically the same mobile home that you see in this film. And these guys take the wrong turn on the way to the boxing match, and they end up witnessing a gangland killing. And so for the rest of the movie, they're just on the run from these gangsters led by Dennis O'Leary. Or is it just Dennis Leary? So Judgment Night is essentially a re-skinning of Race with the Devil, really. It wouldn't surprise me if whoever wrote Judgment Night was hugely inspired by Race with the Devil, just as it wouldn't surprise me if the origin of Race with the Devil is from the mind of somebody who'd seen Texas Chainsaw like a couple of years previously and thought to themselves, oh, I'd like to do something like that in Texas, but we'll have a different horror waiting at the end of the rainbow. I will say at this point that I've seen this film many, many times going back to my teenage years. I first watched this probably in the middle of the 90s. It was a film that I would have randomly just given a chance to very late at night because it was on TV, and to my surprise, I discovered a real gem of 70s filmmaking, because I've often gone back to this film over the years, and I've even got my own DVD copy of it now. And just the other week, it did occur to me that I should really do a review of this, a full-length review, and just get it out to more and more people, that this is worth checking out. I just don't think it's fair that something like Texas Chainsaw gets all the plaudits, whereas something like this, which is sort of similar, is basically just a completely unknown film. Granted, this film doesn't have an icon in it like Leatherface, but still, It's very, very good. It's also quite an expensive looking horror film, I think, at times. Now, I haven't actually looked up what the budget was for this, but the actors in it are more your sort of mainstream Hollywood sort of actors of the time rather than horror actors. You know, we've got people like Peter Fonda in this. And if you look at the filmographies of his co-stars in this film, they're all people who didn't usually do horror. I kind of wonder whether this film did start out as more of a, you know, a mainstream thriller of a film, but then once they'd finished it, they realised that they had more of a kind of down market horror film on their hands. But there are several times throughout the watching of this where you may well feel like it does look quite expensive compared to other films of its type. Like the scene where the mobile home goes to the where they first meet the cultists for the first time. There's loads of really good overhead shots that just show you this general area. The location scouting for this film was absolutely fantastic. You don't need any imagination for this scene. It's very laid out for you just how isolated this area is from the freeway. It's quite hard to get to. The mobile home has to go over this like shallow riverbed thing. It wouldn't be easy to get to where the cultists are on foot. It's pretty cool. There's also this subplot involving bike racing. So the two main guys in this, they share a passion when it comes to bike riding, but it's bizarre that this is in the story because near the beginning we see these two like racing around in bikes, and you think to yourself at the time, okay, this is going to come back into the story later on. Maybe they will use the bikes to get away from the cultists in the finale or something like that, because they take these bikes with them on the holiday. They're strapped to the back of the mobile home, but the bikes just never come back into play. It's really weird. So it sort of leaves you thinking, well, what was the point in all that setup with bikes at the start? I sort of wonder whether maybe originally they were going to use the bikes later on in the film, but maybe they had to strip the film back a little bit because of budget reductions, maybe. I don't know, but if you're going to do all that setup with bikes, but not use them later on, then what's the point? You might as well have these guys be passionate about poker or fishing or something, because it costs a bit of money to film scenes with bikes racing around. You need stuntmen, and at one point in this we get a complicated jump where this guy ends up flying into some water, and earlier than that there's this whole racetrack set up with bikes spinning around and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, they've put a lot of effort into that. Where did that subplot go? There's also a scene about halfway through this, which I imagine for most people who've seen this film will be the real signature scene of the movie. I don't actually want to say what happens in it, because if you've not seen this, then I want you to discover this scene for yourself. I will say that it involves animals, and it looks to me like real animals as well. There's no CGI in this film because it is a 70s movie. But when I watch this scene, I just think to myself, they must have had like animal handlers on set to make sure that this thing was safe to do. The actual actors look in real peril during this scene. It's just terrifying. The first time I saw it, I just couldn't believe what I was watching. This scene comes out of nowhere. It will give you a real jolt, a real surprise, but it is genuinely frightening. And near the end as well, we get a finale which absolutely made my heart skip a beat the first time that I realised what was going on. But again, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to spoil what happens at the end of this. Sure, there are some people who will watch most of this film and think to themselves, well, this isn't that scary a film. It's pretty old hat, but for Joe Average of heart, it still, even today, has the power to sort of give me a few jolts to the system. I think it's genuinely a scary movie. Another great scene is when our heroes decide that it might be a good idea to spend some time in general civilization rather than being on the road. So they spend one night at this kind of leisure park that's full of other caravans and mobile homes. I guess they think safety in numbers sort of thing. But this plan is a little bit flawed because the cultists know what they look like, but they don't necessarily know what all the cultists look like. So in theory, what this means is that the cultists can just wander around this leisure park at will, stand like 3 yards away from our heroes, and they wouldn't be any the wiser. And the best example of this is when one of the women goes to use the swimming pool, and she's enjoying it for about 20 seconds, and then she gets freaked out because she notices that there are like 3 or 4 sets of male eyes on her from around the pool. Now, it could be that these are just random guys who want to get a good look at a hot woman in a bikini, or these could be the cultists, keeping an eye on this woman. It's a brilliantly written scene. There's a couple who introduce themselves to our main characters. I can't remember their first names, but they're Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. And at the time they do this, I think to myself, "Oh, are these the cultists trying to get in with the main characters, or are these just over friendly local yokels?" You just don't know. But out of the two of them, I loved the guy who does most of the talking. Now, the actor's name is Clay Tanner. He didn't do an awful lot really in his career, but in this role, he's only in the film for like 2 or 3 scenes, but boy, does he make an impact. He's absolutely hilarious. I love his acting. He's like a cross between Bruce Campbell and Ray Liotta, with a light sprinkling of Norman Bates just thrown into the performance. It's great. And I was looking at this guy thinking, "Oh, I'm just not sure about him." He takes our main characters to a kind of ranch bar, and a big fight breaks out, and Henderson's just banging on the table with a grin on his face, like he's just a great character. At the end of the film, and I'd forgotten that this was in there, we do get some what you think is confirmation of a couple of the identities of the cultists. One of them does turn out to be the cop, and another one turns out to be Henderson, but I interpret that scene, and it's only a very brief scene. You literally, just for a couple of seconds, see these characters walking across a field with a cult robe on. I interpret that as the imagination of our main heroes in the mobile home. Simply because I don't really want any reveals in this film. I think this film is better if you never find out who was a cultist and who wasn't. Because all the way through this, it's really exciting because every time the characters stop at a gas station, you're constantly thinking, "Oh, is the attendant part of the cult?" Every time we go to the police station or the leisure park, every new person that we come across, you're constantly thinking, are they part of the cult? Are they part of the cult? And I don't want those questions answered for me by the end, personally. So when you see those characters coming across the field with robes on, even though it's only brief, you can interpret it literally and think to yourself, okay, we've got the identities of at least a couple of them. Or you can do what I do, which is just think to yourself that this is just the panicked imagination of one of the women from inside the mobile home. Maybe once they get surrounded, one of the women is thinking, "Oh my God, it's so and so and so and so all along. I knew it," even though actually she's not really seeing those people. But it's entirely up to you. So I've got one more little nitpick about this film before I get on and show you my score. There's a scene where the two wives go to a library and they want to get a book on the occult so they can research what they're up against. I'm not sure this scene needed to be in the film, but whatever. They go into this library and they quickly realise that the book that they want, they're not allowed to take it out because it's a reference book. So they come up with this little scheme where one of them will distract the librarian whilst the other one is sneaking it into their handbag. And then once they're outside, they're like, "Did you get the book?" "Yeah." "Ooh, high five." And it occurred to me the other night watching this play out that I've seen this 5 or 6 times in films and TV shows. I think it's a little trope, because every time this happens, it always seems to be that the film or the TV show in question is depicting this as something really cool that the characters have done. It's like the films are saying, "Oh, look how resourceful our heroes are here, stealing this library book. Look how brave and spunky they are, not letting this little roadblock get them down. They've sneaked it into the back of their pants or their handbag, and oh, look, they managed to get it after all. They've got that library book. How clever they are." And I'm just thinking to myself, no, it's theft. It's just stealing, and don't steal it. Just do your research in the library and then exit the library without having stolen the book. I do say this as somebody who has loved libraries throughout my life. I'm a little bit sad that they seem to be closing down left, right and centre, and I must admit I haven't used one for a long, long time, but it just bugs me how this seems to pop up in movies and TV shows quite regularly, and it's always depicted as a cool thing that they're doing, because you know damn well that they're never going to return this library book. But just something that I noticed the other night, and it does just sort of irritate me a little bit. Right, I'll quickly show you the version of the film that I've got for this. It is a very basic, vanilla version of the film. Absolutely no features, but picture and audio, absolutely fine. It's fine in this state, you know, that there's nothing wrong with it or anything, but I would certainly love to see like a big industry giant like Indicator or Arrow come along and do a proper version of this with tons of features. I'd love to be able to explore this film, explore the stories behind it, you know. I mean, this probably cost me like £5 or £6, but I would spend way more if they did a better version of it. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this film. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're not done. Half. 4.5 bloody axes out of 5. This is an absolutely superb film. I absolutely love it. And but for 1 or 2 little nitpicks here and there, I might have even called it a masterpiece. This is, honestly, this is wonderful. I will admit that part of the reason I love it so much is because I first saw it when I was very young, and I've had a long-lasting relationship with the film. Maybe for people my age who just watch it today and it's their first time doing so, maybe the film won't be as impactful for you. It might be a little bit of a Jason Takes Manhattan situation, because I saw that film as a kid. It scared the shit out of me, but I developed a lifelong love for Friday Part 8 that other people just simply don't have. Although I think most people will see the art in Race with the Devil far more than they ever would in Jason Takes Manhattan, no matter what time of life that you're watching it. But certainly this is recommended. Get on it, give it a try, and I will leave it there for today. Right, until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.